Jewelry is detail, it's distraction, it's focal point. Because what jewelry does is create brilliant focal points. And as I always say, if you're looking at my eyes, you're not looking at my thighs.
Okay, we're here again with Imogen Lamport from Inside Out Style, and this time we're talking about body shape. Welcome, Imogen.
Thanks for having me, Carol.
So, does your body shape have a bearing on the clothing and the jewellery that suits you?
Absolutely it does. So what body shape tells us is much less than people think. And this is because personality is the number one. So I do recommend you going to watch that personality video that Carol and I have already made if you want to understand that. But what body shape tells us is where to put different sorts of lines on our body. So it tells us about the silhouette of clothes. So should I have a straighter silhouette? Should I have a curvier silhouette? Those kind of design details. It also tells us where to put horizontal details to balance, because horizontal lines are broadening and create a focal point on our body. And this is because we're always looking for the horizon. So we notice horizontal lines. They draw our eye first over any other line. This is why we don't like a picture frame that's a little askew. We really notice that, and it's because our brains are like going, have I got vertigo, or is that, not straight? So this is why our eyes are actually always looking for horizontal lines. It tells us where to put verticals. So verticals elongate and slim. And so if we want a slimmer part of the body by putting vertical details, that helps to cut that part of the body up and create a more elongated appearance. We can also use curved lines. So curved lines are slower lines. Our eyes, it's much slower for our eye to, follow a curved line. So curved lines can add some volume to the body. And then diagonal lines. So diagonals, so things like a collar, this can be a bit of a diagonal line. A V-neck is a diagonal line. So these things are diagonals, and they draw the eye places. So what body shape tells us is where do I use those sorts of lines, and how do I use those sorts of lines in my clothing. It doesn't tell us what sorts of clothes we like. That's what personality tells us. So this is why we need to understand personality, because even if you know exactly the shapes that suit you, so if you're an H shape like me, you'll know that you look better in a straight skirt than a flared skirt. The fit and flare shape does not work on my body. But even knowing that I suit a straighter shape, but if I go into a store and go, but do I buy it in leopard print or a floral? Do I like it in a solid fabric? Do I want it into something lighter and floatier? That's all personality. So this is why we have to understand more than just body shape. Body shape's just a small part of what I call the style puzzle. But it will influence things like, so if we think about jewelry, what is jewelry? So jewelry is detail, it's distraction, it's focal points. And I always think what I'm always trying to do with my clients is help them learn how to be a magician with clothing. So what is the art of the magician? There's two things. So we have the illusion, right? So that's the first thing that the magician does. It's that sleight of hand. It's how do I use those lines to make the eye go somewhere? Do I want to, focus it somewhere with a horizontal line? Do I want to create balance using horizontal lines? Do I want to elongate and slim using those vertical lines? Like I can use, color. Do I want to make an advancing color or a receding color? So what do I want to bring forward? What do I want to push back? They are part of our illusion toolkit. Also the scale of things. Do I want something big scale, small scale? All those things are our illusion toolkit. And then, though, remember that the magician has to always make you go, look over here, so you don't know what's going on over here. And that's the beauty of jewelry. Because what jewelry does is create brilliant focal points. What it does is distracts you. So the eye goes, oh, look at that, pretty. I'm just going to stop and rest there. I'm not going to go any further. And as I always say, if you're looking at my eyes, you're not looking at my thighs. And I always say the first thing you want to do is dress your portrait area. So if you're having a portrait painted, it would be, this part of your body. Put the fun stuff, just like Carol and I have got on today, in the portrait area. Because what that does is draw attention to that area so people aren't noticing what else is going on. So this is where, you can get the jewelry, the earrings, the brooches, Now, if you think about a bracelet, for example, where does your arm hang? If it hangs down by your thighs and you say have a more pear or A-shaped body, that will draw attention down there. So it may not be your best jewelry piece. You might go, actually, bracelets aren't as good for me as, necklaces and earrings are. Or it could be, I'll make sure if you wear a watch and a bracelet on opposite hands, that can draw a big horizontal line across your body. So you might say, I'll only wear it on one side because then it's a short horizontal, versus if I have one on either side, the eye actually draws a line between those two little horizontals and creates a widening effect. So we can think about how to use jewelry based on our body shape and what actually suits us. But I was going, everybody should be putting something fun and exciting up here.
So we touched briefly on defining features when we talked about personality, but tell us a little bit more about that and how that affects the jewelry that suits us.
So we have our kind of face and features. So it's our face shape, the shape of our, the texture of our hair in a way. Is it straighter or more curly or curvy? The shape of our eyebrows, are they more curved? Are they straighter? The shape of our cheeks, are they more round and appley or straighter and flatter or more angular? So when we look at all these things, if we are more oval or overly angular, we're going to look better in more angular shaped jewelry. So triangles, and rectangles and those sorts of shapes. Versus if we have more curves, we'll be better in ovals and softer, rounder shapes. Now, most of us are a combination. There are more people that are a combination than anything else, where we have a combination of some curved features and some angular features. And so therefore we are better in combination. So something like a heart that you are wearing, Carol, that is a combination shape. It's a pointy end and curved pieces. I've got combination here. I've got round bits and rectangular bits in my necklace. So this is where we can think about like the little brooch you've got. It's a combination of pointed pieces, but also curves of the wings. So this is where, if you are more curvy, you'll find that things that have overall more curves is more flattering on you. It creates reminiscence, a harmony with your features. Versus if you're overly more angular, you'll find that you look better in pieces that have more angularity to them. Now, they don't have to be 100% angular, 100% curved. It's when we have that reminiscence, that similarity, that harmony, that is when we look our best. When we do the opposite of what we are, that's the worst, because what it actually does is it points out the difference. What we see is, so if someone has very angular features and then they wear really curved details, we go, oh, their face is really angular. I'd never noticed that before. Or if they're very curved, I'll always remember, actually, one of my friends, she bought a jacket. It was a double-breasted trench coat. And she put it on. She said, I bought this, but I put it on. Something's wrong with it. And I'd never noticed how angular her features were until she put it on. I noticed these two big rows of big round buttons. I was going, it's the buttons. They're too round and they're too close to your face. And I noticed now, you've got much more sharpness to your features. So now with something like buttons, we can just change the buttons. It's not really hard to do. Then we can save the garment by changing the buttons. So it is thinking about, yes, what are our features, and then what are the features of the details that we're wearing. So this is where when we're deciding on a piece of jewelry, if you were, say, more combination, say something like the earrings you've got on, Carol, are great, because we've got the little round pearls, then we've got the angular and the straight wires. And so that is a great combination piece.
Yeah, so just because you're a curvy girl doesn't mean you can't wear straight lines. You just need to wear them in combination.
Yeah.
And I actually did a video on this a wee while ago about using shape and texture in your jewellery and how to, combine them to make a more coherent piece. And if you're interested in seeing that one, I'll leave that in the linked in the description box below. So length, let's talk about length of jewellery, because I know we've talked about this before, how, where you finish your jewellery is going to attract attention to the that part of your body. So just expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, so thinking about that magician, it's where do I want people to look? So put jewellery where you want people to look. So if we're thinking about those, say, with necklaces, like how long should my necklace be?
That's a good question.
The first thing we can think about is one face length down is an ideal place to have a piece of jewellery end. So for a necklace, like just go one face length and then do that again, and you go have a piece of jewelry, like have it sitting there. That's great.
It's easy.
Easy. So if you want a longer piece, try 2 face lengths. So that proportion, we like to see our proportions repeated. So go 2 face lengths. Now, if you have a very large bust, what we probably don't want is something ending right at that bust peak, because that's just going to draw attention to it. So we might find that we're actually better if we've got a really large bust to keep things a bit shorter. But if we have a large bust and we want to wear something longer, A, do it in that proportion, but B, make sure there is chunky up high. What we don't want is it skinny up high and then all the detail here at the bust, because that creates a focal point at the bust. So we want is the focal point actually to be up higher, and then it may be just a kind of a plain chain bit down there where it's much less noticeable. But if you have a small bust, doesn't matter. You know, you can you can do that. So if you have a tummy, like you can buy those really long necklaces that have a pendant on the end, and they down here on your tummy. So if you have a tummy, that is not where you want people to look. So think about, if I don't want my tummy to be the focal point, don't put a piece of jewellery on it. Keep the jewellery up here, away from your tummy. Now, quite often you'll see a lot of stores, like plus-size stores, where they sell this because it's very easy to get it over your head. So it's much easier for people to try on. And so just because they sell it in those stores doesn't mean it's actually good for you.
Yeah, and in the past I've bought, those long necklaces, not necessarily ones with a pendant, but a long necklace. And I've always ended up wrapping them around my neck twice, because for me that proportion just doesn't work.
Yeah. You're more petite too. So one of the things too is about proportions of how long your legs are as well. So if you have shorter legs than, kind of body area, then you'll find that you need to keep your necklaces shorter. Versus someone with really long legs can get away with longer necklaces because it actually draws the eye down.
Right.
So this is where thinking about those proportions as well, and also the scale of what your pieces are next to. So if you have small facial features, I've got quite small facial features, so I can't wear one really big chunky thing because it just overwhelms my facial features. Versus you've got larger facial features than me. You've got a bigger mouth than me, so you've got, more prominent cheekbones. So you can get away with larger pieces next to your face. Versus I have to wear smaller pieces. So if I want to, but if I had a larger bust, then I want to upscale because then my bust looks smaller. So I'm going to upscale with many smaller pieces rather than just one large piece. And even with something like a brooch like this is, because it's broken up by the lines, it doesn't feel as big as if it was just one solid, nothing else going on piece. So thinking about that, if you need to upscale because you want to make your bust look smaller, then upscale with multiple smaller pieces rather than one large piece.
So a triple strand necklace rather than one nice bulky necklace, yeah. And I tend to do that quite a lot, wear multiple strands as opposed to just one, because I'm not petite, but I'm not very big either, and one large kind of necklace with big pieces just doesn't work for me.
Yeah, and that's the thing. So you can put it on and you go, oh no, the scale of those things is too large. So it relates to your overall body scale, your facial feature scale, your bust scale. So it's then kind of getting a balance with those things.
So if you've got broad shoulders, how does that work with your jewellery?
So this is where you may want to upscale a bit with your jewellery. So one fine piece with very broad shoulders is going to look really out of balance.
Oh, there's a lot to it.
There is. And this is why I think, we're not educated in this. There is a science to this. And so this is where don't feel badly, if you've made mistakes, because you just didn't know that. I spent years with a massively outsized bust wearing tiny pieces of jewellery and then wondering why everybody talked to my chest. And as soon as I learnt if I upscaled my necklaces, people did not notice my bust. That I'm like going, wow, but I knew I had to upscale in multiple small pieces, not one large piece.
Right. And I actually never ever wore jewellery, which is really hard to even conceive now. But until 20 years ago, I never wore jewellery at all. Or if I did, I wore, one chain with a pendant or a little drop. And I just, I didn't see it as important. But once I went through your course, 7 Steps to Style, I realised that, you know, putting the focus around my neck here was what I wanted to do. So it taught me, A, how to, what jewellery to wear, and B, that I needed to wear jewellery, and what to choose, what colours, what, you know, everything really. Now, Imogen has kindly offered that if you sign up for one of her courses using the link in the description box below, she will give you 2 free courses. So that is a pretty cool deal. The courses that she is going to give you are an outfit masterclass, and that is valued at $47, and an online shopping guide. That one's valued at $97, so worth taking advantage of that. We are going to talk about colour in the next one, by the way. If you're interested in Imogen's course, I will leave the link below, and also remember to watch the next one, which is about colour. If you haven't seen the previous one, which was about personality, then go back and watch that as well. Thank you, Imogen. We'll see you again soon.
My pleasure.